Ladies and gentlemen, today is a Les Miles appreciation show. Okay, we are going to appreciate everything that Les does for the rivalry. And that means the good and the bad. We're going to make fun of Les Miles today. I went through an entire Les Miles press conference just for you guys. But I'm also here to say that deep down, you all know this is true as well as I do. Les Miles being involved with this rivalry is a great thing. Les being the head coach at Kansas is an awesome thing for K-State. And I'm not just talking about the fact that he appears to be incompetent and sending that thing further into the crater that it's already dug for itself, that being the KU football program. But also because he provides a great villain. He provides tremendous fodder for us, and he sparks some excitement in this rivalry that just wasn't there when the head coach is David Beatty or Turner Gill. Now, Charlie Weis is much in the same vein as Les Miles, okay? Charlie Weis sparked some of this. Not as much as Les, though. And not just because of the buildup heading into the game last year. So I'm here to tell you today that we are going to appreciate the absolute heck out of Les Miles and everything that he brings to the rivalry here today. Welcome into the game. John Kurtz, Steven Schaefer is filling in for Mitch Fortner, who's going to be gone for the next 7 days with K-State soccer midweek trip. He will make a guest appearance later on in the show just for a bit, but I'm going to leave that up as a surprise to the rest of you. Okay, so I saw this sentiment out there among K-State social media. I saw somebody say, I just can't get as excited for a bloodbath this year knowing that KU fans are so disinterested and checked out on the season. And I disagree with that. I am still, as a fan, as a media member, as somebody who does a show that wants entertainment, I am still very excited about Saturday. It's not at the fever pitch level that it was at last year, but it's still pretty high. And the main reason is because Les is still the coach, and Jeff Long is still the athletic director, and their program is still floundering. And as long as those three elements are in place, I'm always going to be pretty jacked up about the game. Last year is a high that you will not match, okay? You know, I mean, they say the first time you do a drug, right, you're always chasing that high. I'm not saying last year was as high as it can get, but there's a shade of that with this. If you're chasing that high, yes, it's not going to be like that, because last year Kansas was chirping. Kansas had enough confidence that they were chirping. They had beaten Texas Tech. They had almost beaten Texas. They were at home. They had an offense with who they thought was a star in Brent Dearman, and they were about to take on K-State, who looked like they were in a letdown spot after beating Oklahoma. Meanwhile, here in Manhattan, we're riding the high of beating Oklahoma, and there was a lot of fun build-up to that game last year. All right, this is not going to be that. And it's likely not going to replicate, no matter what happens on the field, the feeling of going out there and kicking their ass in Lawrence the way that K-State did last year after the opponent had been chirping. But this also isn't like a ho-hum, oh, Bill Snyder is just taking it to Turner Gill, or a ho-hum, oh, Bill Snyder is just beating Terry Allen again. Yawn. I mean, that's definitely how it felt in the late 90s and early 2000s. All right, Glenn Mason's out of there. Terry Allen clearly sucks. That program isn't doing much of anything. It's not going anywhere, and K-State's a juggernaut. Yeah, it's great to beat Kansas, but this is fairly boring. And Terry Allen isn't Les Miles in a number of ways. Okay, that statement is very layered. But Terry Allen isn't Les Miles. I still get just as excited for this because he is the figurehead that's there. And it's because of everything that Les Miles represents. I mean, he is a guy that has still some residual value to the college football world because of who he is, right? There is a little bit of that. And so when your opponent has a coach that has a national championship ring and does have some esteem to him in that regard, whether you want to admit it or not, that does add something. But more importantly, it's about the villain role here. Les represents everything Kansas is. 2020, Les Miles does anyway. The beat up, downtrodden version of Les Miles that's rolling out there these days. Right? He represents everything that Kansas is now. Not necessarily downtrodden, but taking this big swing toward style over substance. Whatever we can do to get the big name, whatever we can do to get that style, that's what we need because we are Kansas. And especially when paired with Jeff Long, the guy who eats ketchup with a fork. That guy, of course, wanted to swing for the name value in somebody from the SEC because it's like double hubris. We are Kansas, Harvard of the Midwest, and I am Jeff Long, SEC athletic director, so I will go find myself a great SEC head coach. I mean, it's enough to make you want to vomit, and therefore it turns into a great villain to have on the other sideline in Les. What Kansas did there was akin to, remember when the Royals went out and signed Benito Santiago? And didn't they grab Juan Gonzalez too? Just old veteran players with name value. That's all it is. They're terrible. They're on the way out, but I guess they do have some name value. It's exactly what Kansas did. I mean, you see it happen all the time in professional sports. Aging superstars signed just for their name value. This would not be as satisfying or exciting if Kansas had made a hire that was similar to what K-State did with Chris Kleiman. And by that, I mean just a coach that was much more about the substance that was there to him as opposed to being a real sexy name. If Kansas, let's just flip-flop it here. If Kansas had hired Matt Wells instead of Texas Tech, they go out and get Matt Wells. So they hire Utah State's coach who's been pretty solid, good track record, substance at a lower level. This would not be nearly as fun. Last year wouldn't have been nearly as fun. This year wouldn't have been nearly as fun. Even if Kansas were a better team, which they probably would be, it would not be as much fun because you're not getting to beat up on Les and everything that he represents. Les on the sideline for Kansas represents everything that we all, and I will even include myself in this, okay, that we all love to hate about Kansas. And represents what makes Kansas the character that they are. Good stories need characters. And Les fits the country club kind of atmosphere that's over there in Lawrence and the aura of hubris that is constantly emanating out of there. It's perfect. I was reading Bob Stoops. I've mentioned this a bunch of times. You guys know I read Bob Stoops' book. And one of the players said, playing Texas, it was like playing the country club. Texas is a country club. Well, Kansas is a country club. They're just like a diet version of that. Even not back Texas. Kansas obviously is the diet version of that. So, of course, they have Weekend at Bernie's Les Miles as their head coach. Wouldn't be as fun if it were Matt Wells instead. I would liken it as well to, Kansas basketball fans right now don't seem to be as geeked up about KU K-State games, even when Bruce Weber had the Cats humming. Even during the Elite Eight year, even during the Big 12 championship year, it just didn't have the same edge to it that it had when Frank Martin was the head coach. When Frank was the head coach, now all of a sudden, you have some real star power here, okay? Frank, as the head coach, provided K-State with national relevancy and provided K-State with a genuine character and somebody that was easy for Kansas fans to not, some of it was respect, but also hate, and just a guy that was more of a lightning rod and somebody that was more of a character come to life, just based on mannerisms, the way he acted, who he was, more of a character than Bruce Weber. And so it made it more interesting. And truth be told, I mean, Bruce has beaten Kansas more than Frank has. But the rivalry had more of an edge to it and had Kansas fans more interested when Frank Martin was the head coach because of the character element of this. So I say all that to bring up the fact that I do appreciate Les Miles because I think he's been good for this rivalry for K-State fans. I'm not talking about for Kansas fans, because ultimately I think he's been terrible for Kansas fans. And I think he's going to be terrible by the time it's all said and done for Kansas fans in the rivalry. But for K-State fans, it makes it a hell of a lot more fun to go beat up on them. It does. It does. So please, just join me in admitting today that you do appreciate the fact that Les Miles is involved in this rivalry. Now, to counterbalance this, let's make fun of Les Miles, because I have saved this. I have saved this, the best clip from Les's press conference earlier this week. He was asked about the Who is K-State audio. You know what? Let's start with that. Here, if you forgot about Who is K-State, the audio before the game last year, here you go.
Who we play?
K-State.
Who we play? Who we play? Who is K-State?
All right. Who is K-State? Les Miles then gets asked this question at his weekly press conference.
After the last Kansas State game, a few Kansas State players talked about the motivation they got from a post-game speech from you that was shown on Miles to Go ahead of that game. I'm curious, looking back on that, are there any regrets about any of the way that stuff went down?
Yeah, you know what? It's it's always how it was given, how it was presented, and I think it was a locker room being post game where we win, and looking forward to playing a real quality team. So,
what? No idea what that was. No idea what the intent really was there. Although I suppose in the end it turns into a coach speak answer because Les can't finish a thought, as opposed to just a coach speak answer to give you a coach speak answer. That would not make me feel very confident about where things are going if I'm a Kansas fan. And the bad part about it, if you are a Kansas fan, is I had 3 or 4 people in my mentions say that's actually one of the more sensical responses I've heard from him in a while. And it's not really probably top 5 in worst Les Miles responses that we've had, like most damning bits of Les Miles audio in a year and a half that he's been on the job. It really isn't. And this brings me to point number 2 about why Les is good for this rivalry for K-State fans, because he ain't a good coach anymore. He's not a good coach. And it's a mess, and it's going to be a mess at Kansas. It will continue to be a mess at Kansas. And I think that will include Saturday when they come here to Manhattan to play.